Joe Biden should not concede under any circumstances.
It has nothing to do with if the certain occupant of the White House doesn't feel like moving and has to be fumigated out of there.
So when I stumbled on these clips, I said, hey, Joe, you already used these clips in your videos. I said, yeah, I did. But I began to now understand better the stuff in these clips that I didn't even understand when I was using them, even though I explained them properly when I did use them. But now it's all beginning to make mega sense to me why these women dropped all their clue months before the election. We're going to start with Hillary Clinton, and I'll do my best to break it all down, to decode it and help you understand how these women told us in plain sight what they were planning, how they were going to execute it, and when they were going to execute it. And it actually turned out to be true.
So we've got to have a massive legal operation. And I know the Biden campaign is working on that.
So we got to have massive, underline, massive legal operation. I know the Biden campaign is working on that. Massive legal operation for what? This was months before the election. Why do you want to have massive legal operation? Because everything you see happening now was anticipated. That's why they had a war game. And I'm going to tell you a little bit more about that war game. They already anticipated all of this. And the mainstream media is busy acting like, oh, it is such a shock. Donald Trump does not want to concede. Why is he behaving like this? What's happening with Trump? They knew all of this would happen.
We have to have poll workers, and I urge people who are able to be a poll worker.
Poll workers. The same poll workers who were receiving instructions and giving instructions about ballots. You have to backdate all those ballots. All these ones, ignore them, throw them. Look at all those videos we were seeing where poll workers were sorting out ballots that belong to a particular candidate, of course, in this case, Donald Trump, and trashing them. And then some poll workers were now canceling stuff and then finding the ones for Joe Biden and putting it there, and all kinds of nonsense that happened with the ballots. It stopped with the poll workers. They were the ones who executed all of that. The poll workers. She told us way back. Maybe we weren't listening, or maybe we didn't take her seriously.
We have to have our own teams of people to counter the force of intimidation that the Republicans and Trump are going to put outside polling places.
The force of intimidation. What force of intimidation could Hillary have been anticipating from a sitting president of the United States of America during elections? How could Donald Trump be putting out a force of intimidation at the polling centers? There was not going to be any such thing. You know what Hillary was telling us here? She was clearly telling us that they have got some macho men, some bouncers, some muscular, menacing guys, horrible, scary-looking guys who are going to be at the polls in mostly Democrat-run states to scare away registered Republican poll watchers who might want to come in to watch them count the ballots. Guess what? We now have testimonies all over the place, from Michigan to Pennsylvania to Wisconsin to all these other places where all these Republican poll watchers are actually recounting their ordeal in the hands of these horrible looking folks at the poll centers that Hillary is talking about here. How did those guys told them to leave and warded them off And in some cases, even got almost physical with them just to get them away. Because constitutionally, they have the right to witness the counting. But these guys already knew what they were about to execute. So they brought these men around so that when the Republican poll watchers come around, they will be able to intimidate them and kick them out of the poll centers. And that's exactly what took place. That's what happened. Hillary told us here, live and direct, months before the elections. That's why a man who was leading in Pennsylvania by over 700,000 votes suddenly is losing the election in Pennsylvania. And you see them blocking the windows, refusing to let anybody see what is happening. And people had to use binoculars to see if they can see what's happening. Something the Constitution allows for people from both parties to witness the counting of the election. Hillary said, no, we're going to have those guys there. And they had them there. We probably didn't understand what she was saying. Or maybe we underrated her.
Yeah, this is a big organizational challenge, but at least we know more about what they're going to do. And, you know, Joe Biden should not concede under any circumstances, because I think this is going to drag out. And eventually, I do believe he will win if we don't give an inch.
A big organizational challenge. I agree with her.
We have put together, I think, the most extensive and inclusive voter fraud organization in the history of American politics.
I mean, for you to put together all that I've just told you now, the poll watchers who are going to be coached on how to make sure that anything that bears the name of Donald Trump is kicked out. You have to do this, you have to throw this one in the trash, you have to remove this one, you have to reject this one. I mean, that's huge. And then you have to have the bouncers and the scary looking guys standing there to make sure Republicans don't come to look at the counting of the ballots. And then you have all these other people who are at the top, who are at the bottom and everything. You have to have everyone loyal to the Democrat Party. So that's a huge organizational challenge. And I agree with her in total. But then she goes ahead to say, Joe Biden should not concede under any circumstances. Do you know the implications of that? In other words, even if Joe Biden officially loses, even when it is clear that he has lost, that Joe Biden should not concede. Months before the elections, Hillary Clinton is telling Joe Biden, do not concede under any circumstances. And we want to sweep all of that under the carpet, right? She actually said that. But why did she say that? So this takes me to the war game. I had a full video that I did to expose the Democratic war game that took place months before the election as well. The Democrats' war game for election includes West Coast secession, possible civil war. West Coast secession. So West Coast is going to secede from America. This is war games. Remember, they always give you these war games to paint a picture of a possible scenario. But when they make these war games, basically they're telling you that this is going to happen. This is how Agenda 201 happened and prepared us for coronavirus. And eventually when it happened, everybody was caught unawares because we thought it was just a normal war game thing, that it doesn't mean anything. Here is another one again. And let me read you what they said in this war game scenario here. Okay, first of all, it says Democrats are contemplating secession and potential civil war as they game up possible scenarios for a closely contested election, according to a report by Ben Smith in a New York Times column Sunday. But conveniently, a group of former top government officials called the Transition Integrity Project actually gamed 4 possible scenarios, including one that doesn't look that different from 2016. A big popular win for Mr. Biden and a narrow electoral defeat, presumably reached after weeks of counting the votes in Pennsylvania. For their war game, they cast John Podesta, who was Hillary Clinton's campaign chairman in the role of Mr. Biden. They expected him, when the votes came in, to concede, just as Mrs. Clinton had. But Mr. Podesta, playing Mr. Biden, shocked the organizers by saying he felt his party wouldn't let him concede, alleging voter suppression. He persuaded the governors of Wisconsin and Michigan to send pro-Biden electors to the Electoral College. In that war game, a war game is more like a reenactment of a future that they are anticipating. In this case, with respect to the U.S. elections. So months before the elections, they reenacted it, they dramatized it. That's what it's called, war game. And while they were dramatizing the whole scenario that they feel will play out during the elections, they had someone to play Joe Biden. The person who played the role of Joe Biden was John Podesta of the Spirit Cooking fame. And so John Podesta, in that war game, it turned out that in the war game, that Donald Trump actually won the elections through the Electoral College. But when it dawned on Joe Biden, which was being played by John Podesta, that Trump has now won the elections, Podesta refused to concede. This war game came out before Hillary now went public and said Joe Biden should not concede under any circumstances. The people are so united and so decided on what they wanted to do. Nothing came to them as a surprise. Forget the mainstream media, which is already in bed with them, which they own and sponsor and actually run by themselves. They knew all of this was going to happen. But there's a twist now. The war game told them that Trump was going to win. And the war game says even when he wins, Joe Biden do not concede under any circumstances. But why do we have the situation we have today? It is because they knew too well that if it becomes clear and obvious to the whole world that Joe Biden has lost and Biden still refuses to concede, that even their liberal base is going to turn on them and get angry with them as to why would you lose elections and refuse to concede. So what they decided to do is to play with the minds of the people. So they make sure that the media quickly rushed and jumped the gun and went ahead to declare Joe Biden the winner of the election. There was so much evidence of election fraud, of malpractices, of illegal activities in this election. And the president of the United States of America, the other opponent to Joe Biden, had already been vocal. It's not like he kept quiet. It's not like he was thinking about contesting the election. He had already contested. He had even gone on record to say Joe Biden should not dare to claim victory. That is huge. That is enough to make you draw back and say, you know what? We have a problem here. That means we're going to go to court. You are ignoring a sitting president of the United States of America to go ahead to call an election when you have not been certified by any state. It's not that the media didn't know what they were doing. They knew exactly what they were doing. You know what they were doing? They were trying to make sure that by calling the elections, that they will poison the minds of their liberal base and give them the fake and false impression that Joe Biden had won, so that when eventually Donald Trump reclaims his victory, which they know he has actually gotten, it will now look as if Trump is the one stealing the elections from Joe Biden. So they set Donald Trump up by calling that election for Joe Biden prematurely. So you see, the Democrats have played a beautiful game. And this is a horrible game at that. So rather than Joe Biden losing elections officially and saying, I don't want to concede. Now they have now got ahead to call the election for him and made him look like he is the winner, so that when the real winner takes his victory, everybody will now say, oh, they stole it from Joe. And then they say, Joe, why don't you concede now that he has gotten the election? He's now the winner. Joe will say, no, I'm not going. So it will now boil down to the same thing that they told him not to do. The same thing they reflected in the war game. The same thing that Hillary said he should not do. That's exactly what we are going to face now very soon. Because Trump is almost on track to reclaiming the stolen victory. And that's why I said in my last video that I worry so much about what will happen to America, or what will become of the United States of America when this victory is reclaimed, because the liberal base that has now been poisoned by the mainstream media will turn on Trump and turn on the United States of America and want to tear everything down. And then when they tell Joe to concede to him, Joe will say, never, I'm not going to concede. So now you see, even though they had already planned never to concede, Joe refusing to concede now will now receive the backing of their liberal base. They will not say, no, don't concede. It's no longer going to be the Democrats saying don't concede. The whole base and many people from around the world will now say, Joe, do not concede to him. That it was something they already planned ahead of time. He just decided to use a different route to go about it.
Whether he knows it yet or not, he will be leaving.
Did you hear that? Whether he knows it yet or not, he will be leaving. I mean, how do you say that? He will be leaving. In what sense? There's going to be an election. So does that mean that if he wins the election that he will not stay? He will still leave, according to Nancy Pelosi. I know somebody's going to be like, oh, but she's just saying that because she believes that her own party is going to win. Well, I have a few more clips I'm going to show you right now so that I can prove to you that that's not what she's saying. The people declared war on the White House, war on the presidency of the United States of America, openly. They didn't hide it. He will be leaving. Not he may, but he will. A statement of certainty that he will be leaving. So winning or not winning doesn't mean anything to them. Win or lose, Trump must get out of there.
Just because he might not want to move out of the White House doesn't mean we won't have an inauguration ceremony to inaugurate a duly elected president of the United States.
So how did Nancy know that President Donald J. Trump would not be the duly elected president of the United States of America? You see what I was telling you just now? They don't care about who wins or loses. They just want Donald Trump to get out. Can you imagine, just because he might not want to leave, can you imagine this statement? And the so-called mainstream media will never, ever talk about it. She got away with it because they are all part of the conspiracy to destroy Donald Trump. It doesn't matter whether he is doing good or doing right, whether he is winning elections or losing elections. We just want him out and killed, possibly, or something. Just get rid of him.
I'm second in line to the presidency, and just last week I had my regular continuation of government briefing. This might interest you because I say to them, this is never going to happen. God willing, it never will. But there is a process. It has nothing to do with if the certain occupant of the White House doesn't feel like moving and has to be fumigated out of there.
Nancy is literally saying in quotes that they're going to bomb the living daylight out of him. Maybe some type of nuclear attack or something, to fumigate a sitting president of the United States of America. On what basis? That is not even how the 25th Amendment works. There's no such recommendation from the 25th Amendment. And I'm going to read it for you, of course. If you go to the 25th Amendment, sections 1, 2, and 3, I mean, it's just the same thing that happens in Nigeria. The president is feeling sick. He transmits power to the vice president, and he becomes the acting president. He takes care of the nation in acting capacity. But where Nancy was making reference to is actually section 4 of that amendment. And I'm going to read you what this section 4 says so that you see how wicked these people are. And so section 4 says, whenever the vice president and a majority of either the principal officers of the executive department or of such other body as Congress may by law provide, transmit to the president pro tempore of the Senate and the Speaker of the House of Representatives the written declaration that the president is unable to discharge the powers and duties of his office, the vice president shall immediately assume the powers and duties of the office as acting president. Thereafter, when the president transmits to the president pro tempore of the Senate and the Speaker of the House of Representatives his written declaration that no inability exists, in other words, countering what the vice president had said, he shall then resume the powers and duties of his office unless the vice president again now joins with a majority of either the principal officers of the executive department or of such other body as Congress may by law then provide, transmit within 4 days to the president pro tempore of the Senate and the Speaker of the House of Representatives the written declaration that the president is unable still to discharge the powers and duties of his office. Thereupon, Congress shall decide the issue, assembling within 48 hours for that purpose, if not in session. Let me explain to you what this whole big grammar is talking about. So it says here, a vice president has noticed, first of all, and I believe this would never happen except if there's a huge friction between the president and the vice, and then some third-party bad actors are trying to use the vice president against the president. That's the only way you can see something like this happen. That's why I am sure that by history it has never even happened. So a vice president then gets up and writes to the president of the Senate and then to the House Speaker and says, hey, the president is incapacitated. He's not able to discharge his duties anymore. For some reason, this man is not and will not be able to in a long time to come. And then the president hears about it and then writes his own to counter what the vice president is saying and tells them, hey, don't mind him. There is no inability here. I'm still able to do my stuff. And the Constitution, this section says that when he has done that, the president is free to then continue to discharge his duties. But if the vice president resists that and says, no, he's not telling the truth, he is incapacitated, he will not be able to perform his duty, I know because I know, then he will now have to go and get some people from the executive council of the president, from his own executive session, and then get some more people from the House of Representatives to join with him to now transmit another letter to the president of the Senate and to the House Speaker to actually insist that the president is incapacitated and that he needs to be allowed to leave. He needs to be relieved of his duties as the president of the United States of America. Only then will the Congress now meet within 48 hours, if they are not already in session, to decide the matter. There is no provision anywhere of having to fumigate anybody out of there, according to Nancy Pelosi. But she used these words that are very dangerous, and she got away with it. So, if you follow Madam Hillary Clinton, she told us everything that was going to happen November the 3rd and the few days after. If you now listen to Nancy Pelosi, she's telling us the things that will happen right after this period. If you took Hillary for granted and thought she was just blabbing, you can see how all that she said have played out. Don't take Nancy Pelosi for granted. Do not take this woman for granted. The things that she said, she could not have said them if they were not already planned and ready to go. The Bible says that out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaketh. These people would not be speaking and spilling this thing like that if they didn't have the plans already, if things are not already set to roll. So, for Nancy, her own have not yet manifested. For Clinton, hers have all manifested before our eyes. And this is why I am calling everybody to prayer. Because from where I stand, and I will say it again in this video, I can see Donald J. Trump gearing up for victory, to reclaim his victory. It's looking very likely right now. And I can tell you, I mean, you don't even have to live in America to know this. It is so obvious, so clear, that the moment this happens, America will go through so much travail. These liberal nutcases are going to descend on the street and want to tear everything down. And if Trump overreacts and does some things, we might now look at a situation where the so-called foreign powers would want to get involved, and the fumigation that Nancy has spoken about will then become a reality. God forbid. You see why we all need to pray. They told us things. These people told us what they had planned. We need to start taking them seriously, because they are on a suicide mission.